Hello, we've been progressively building the show's website with a first focus on trying to make the content as usable as we can before seriously tackling the aesthetics. And now that we have 5 items in our main navigation, it seemed like a good time to add a way for keyboard and screen reader users to be able to skip the repetition of these links and get to the main page content. WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, doesn't specify skip nav links as such, but says we should have a mechanism to bypass blocks of content which are repeated on multiple web pages. And other examples they give where we might want to use this is on news websites where the user may have to go through various article links to get to the main story, or on e-commerce sites where there could be many filter options for products before they can get to the actual products. And on some sites, I've noticed that there is also, in addition to go to content, there is skip to footer, which isn't going to be relevant in our case as there's nothing there at the moment. But it did make me think a bit more about how I use footers to bury the less relevant content and to add in the legalese. And what I would typically do is add in a skip to the top button, but it would come after the links. And I've not seen anything mentioned on skipping over the footer content. So I looked around at some other sites, and I know that Amazon do a lot of testing, and noticed that they put their back to top before their footer links, which is something I might consider doing on certain sites. And incidentally, the reason why there are no legalese links on the bottom here is that we're not dropping any cookies and we're not tracking anyone at the moment. Truthfully, if it hadn't have been for the increased awareness due to accessibility legislation, and we're probably going to get a lot more of this as we move through the year, and the European Accessibility Act comes into play in June 2025. I'm not sure how much attention I would have paid to these things, which now seems like a shame that it effectively took the law to encourage me to do what I now see as a designer's main job of finding empathy with users. So now I'm trying to sharpen these soft skills, as I think it's becoming more vital, not only so we can increase the reach of our websites and the message in them for perhaps clients, but also to highlight the advantages that designers have over AI. But as a sighted mouse user, I almost never use the keyboard on web pages until recently when I strained my mouse hand. Presumably, age will force me to use the keyboard more often. But from my limited experience, tabbing around the web, and even on a site like this, is really frustrating. I was playing around with this earlier. So I can see where I'm going to a certain point. I can't skip the nav. But when I get into the nav here, I'm completely lost as I go down all the sub-menus and keep tabbing and tabbing and tabbing until, it's popped up again. But my frustrations must pale into insignificance when compared with people who have motor disabilities who rely on assistive technology where they have to manipulate their keyboards with a mouse stick or a head wand, or hit the head against a single switch, or use a sip and puff switch. Many of the sites out there, particularly the off-the-shelf types, so Wix and Squarespace, and with WordPress themes as well, there will be a skip to content added as part of those. But often with those platforms, the user can change things, particularly add in things like forms, where I've gone to a lot of sites and I have to go through the form first before I get to skip to content on certain pages, which I think is pretty confusing. Anyway, I better get off my quite wobbly soapbox and talk about what I'm here to talk about, which is how it's not difficult to do this yourself and do it right. But before I get into that, I just wanted to quickly mention the new focusable pseudo class, which changes a lot of things. And the best way I can explain this, it is supported in all the major browsers except IE. But let me bring up the code editor where I've mocked something up, because this is the easiest way I could understand it. So browsers up till recently behave slightly different to how they do now. And I've mocked that up by putting my own custom styling on the focus here. And I've set it not to invisible, but just to the old focus. And if I go and tab through this, everything's working as it should do. When I get to my form, we can see that's inputting there. That's fine. And I've got it on my send. That's fine. But when I'm a mouse user and I click on send, I've also got it. And it's even worse on something like transcript over here where it stays permanently. Really only need that if I'm tabbing. I used to solve this problem by using JavaScript, which is a slightly wobbly way, and then saying, okay, when a mouse user comes, then we will set the focus to an outline of none. But that's a slightly dangerous if the JavaScript is not working. Well, now the browsers, the modern browsers, will take care of that. So if I take the styling off, we'll see that it's doing what it should do for tabbing. But if I click here, then I don't get it. It works out. It does what my JavaScript did before, so I don't need it. The only thing I need to bear in mind now is that I don't forget that we have focus visible and use just plain focus. But if I stick to this, then that's going to do this kind of magic, or heuristics as they call it. Okay, let's move on to the skip to main content. So first we need to add in the HTML because I need to put in this link and it needs to go to somewhere on the page. And to do that, we'll go over here and I'm adding this just after the opening header tag. And let's anchor here that we have with an ID which is called skip to main, which I have to link to someone on my page. And I've used the main tag here. Some people may use the header one. Don't think it really matters, but that's what I've done and matched that up with this. And then I've added in a class of skip link so I can do the styling. Now, when I started this, I started with a single page, so I didn't add it in as I might normally do on a project. But I did it on purpose because with this, we were wanting to see as well how long we might be able to, with a site like this, with lots of growing content, be able to hold off using a content management system and keep it simple just with VS Code. And I was able to search and replace. So in VS Code, if you go to edit and go down to replace in files, that's basically a search and replace across all the files, then I could just take the header here, tag, put it in search, find it, and then replace it with the 2 lines across all of the pages. I had to do it twice when it came to the main tag because I have a class of narrow and a class of wide on other pages. But it worked well and showed me that we can go on a little bit longer with just keeping things as simple as possible. Let me get rid of that. Okay, I think that's covered that. Let's go and talk about the styling. And so just 2 things we need to do. We need to style the link and we also need to hide it when it's not in focus. And that's what I'm doing here. Let me just comment this out. And the styling here, well, there's a focus ring to go around that. But in this case, I've just put it to an absolute positioning. So it will go over certain devices, over the logo. So I put a Z index on that to make sure that it's still sitting on the top and put a background. The more difficult bit is the hiding stuff. So CSS gives us lots of different ways of hiding stuff, things which aren't here. I've got show notes and this is what I've included. So everything except what I'm actually using here, all this that's commented out, is probably what you might want to use at the moment. It's taken from Tailwind, which they've taken from Bootstrap, and it's talked about a lot because it's a bit of a hack. It's belt and braces. It's doing lots of different things. Some things are sort of deprecated, like clip has been replaced with clip path. I'm using this on its own as an experiment because this is sort of site. So if you see an issue where it's not hiding as it should do, let me know. There was an issue about a year ago with clip path and with Safari. So I don't know if it's working, but I think that is solved. And effectively what this is doing is saying on the element, we're clipping it with an inset of 50% round all of the edges. So they meet in the middle and effectively hide the element. But you might want to put in something like this. There are other methods. W3 schools are using a position and they will send it off screen by a certain amount of pixels. And possibly there is the hiding it with opacity. But this, and you'll want to check it out for yourself, is it. And I think that's it. That's all I needed to say. Next time, I think because Nathan and I on the podcast will be talking about component-based design, I'm using the HTML component here to embed YouTube videos without the user clicking on it it putting forward all the YouTube files that it does. So it's a performance thing, and I'll talk about that next time. Anyway, thanks so much for listening, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.